The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., October 24th, 2017. I hereby appoint the Honorable Trey Hollingsworth to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Paul D. Ryan, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 3rd, 2017, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties. All time shall be equally allocated between the parties, and in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. Each member, other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip, shall be limited to 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Gutierrez, for 5 minutes.
Shortly after the President returned from his trip to Puerto Rico, I received a shipment in my office of paper towels. It didn't come with a note or an explanation, just 12 rows of Viva. I guess there's a little irony, maybe because it's in Spanish. Maybe after watching the President entertain himself by tossing paper towels at hurricane victims in Puerto Rico, some well-intentioned person thought that giving paper towels to Puerto Ricans was an appropriate sign of respect. The gift you give to Puerto Ricans after a major disaster to kind of cheer us up. Viva. Having returned from my second trip to Puerto Rico since the hurricane, I can tell you one thing for sure. We need a lot more than paper towels from the President and this Congress. This is Loisa. I was visiting with the mayor. I want you to look at the pictures. This woman here, she has a disabled adult sleeping on a wet mattress. Yeah, sleeping on a wet mattress. That's the home that she takes care of her son. 4 weeks after the hurricane. Children hiding behind barricades, homes destroyed. This is Comerío, where food 4 weeks after the hurricane, because there is no food, has to be handed neighborhood to neighborhood, hilltop to hilltop, hamlet and village to village within the town. See this? People sleep there on that bed without tarps because somehow we forgot that in a hurricane destroyed society, it might be a good idea to have something over your head. Of course, the President said he gave himself a 10. Tell that to the people that have to live there 4 weeks. I just came back from this trip on Saturday. I'm now not surprised that the congressmen, my colleagues, are taking day trips to Puerto Rico. Yes, that's what we do as members of Congress. We get there at 9 o'clock during the sun of the day, and we leave by 4 before the darkness comes, because of course there is no electricity. And then they take us on a helicopter ride around the island. That's no way to visit. You get off the plane and off the helicopter, and you stay overnight when it's pitch black, because that's the way 3.4 million American citizens live 1 month after the hurricane. That's how they live. So I don't know, maybe congressmen should stop taking day trips where they get there at 9 and leave by 4. Spend the night. Get out of your comfort and go talk to the American citizens that you're supposed to be representing. America, see this? That's a horse stable, abandoned house, where people live. I met a 13-year-old girl there with her mom and her 12-year-old brother. That's where they live. See this mom and the 2 children? No roof over their heads, just a little tarp to keep one part of their house and no place to sleep. See this man right here? He lives in his abandoned house. in a little tent with a 2-month-old child and his wife, disabled, in a wheelchair, and no electricity to run his air tank so that he can get the vital air that he needs to sustain his life. This is what I saw. And this was without the help of the federal government, because if you ask for help, they'll put you on a helicopter and take you on a nice tour, and you will not talk or see anybody. And I know there are some in America saying they should just do this for themselves. Well, guess what? They're citizens of the United States of America. They're a colony of the United States of America. And I just ask America, there are over 500,000 people on that island that are homeless, whose homes have been destroyed, and our government. Here's the one question people kept asking me no matter where I went. They said, where is FEMA? Where is the help that we expect from the most powerful and richest nation in the earth in this moment of despair? And soon it will be out of the headlines, and soon it will be out of the rotation, and we will try to forget, but they will continue to suffer. I came back on a flight from Puerto Rico this past Saturday night, filled with people fleeing. And I met this wonderful woman who said to me, I have my child here. I'm dropping her with my sister so that she can be free. We would not allow this in Texas. We would not allow this in New Jersey. We would not allow this in Florida. We did not allow it even after a week in Katrina. Let's not allow it in Puerto Rico either.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the career and service of Major General Richard C. Nash. Major General Nash recently retired after serving as Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard for 7 years. In his role as Adjutant General, Nash had the important responsibility of overseeing Minnesota's Army and Air National Guard units, an important role where he saw great success. Having served in the Army National Guard since 1976, General Nash was selected for the job of general because of his experience and strong leadership during the conflict in Bosnia and the Iraq War. During his time in the National Guard, as a testament to his hard work and commitment to our great nation, General Nash has received many awards like the Bronze Star and the Meritorious Service Medal. General Richard Nash is a true patriot whose service to our nation has been a blessing to us all. I speak for all Minnesotans when I thank him for his dedication and wish the best in his well-deserved retirement. Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor the life of Carleen Johnston and the beautiful partnership she shared with her loving husband, Dan Johnston. Originally diagnosed with breast cancer in 2012, Carleen passed away in 2016 after a long and hard fight. Carleen's devoted husband, Dan, stood by his wife's side through every moment, keeping his marriage vow to love his wife in health and in sickness. On the day that Carleen passed, Dan shared in a post that caring for his wife in her final days was easy, writing, "When you're helping someone you love, it's not a burden." As tribute to Dan and Carleen's strong marriage and Dan's commitment to caring for his sick wife, Dan was awarded the Waconia Relay for Life's 2017 Honorary Caregiver Award. Our most sincere condolences go out to the Johnston family, and we thank Dan for epitomizing love in its truest form. You are an amazing role model. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support Minnesota's bid to host the 2023 World Expo. I was proud to co-sponsor and see both chambers of Congress unanimously pass the U.S. Wants to Compete for a World Expo Act earlier this year to give Minnesota and the United States a chance to showcase the best we have to offer. The President signed the Expo Act into law in May, and since then, the State Department, the Expo 2023 Coalition, and the entire Minnesota delegation have been working hard to bring this prestigious international event back to the United States. Now, as we near the November 15th announcement from the Bureau of International Expositions, Minnesota is one of the 3 finalists in the running to host the 2023 event, with a proposed theme of Healthy People, Healthy Planet. I can think of no better place to hold such an event, as Minnesota is one of the healthiest states in the country, a hub for medical innovation and world-class location to host the first expo in the United States in more than 30 years. I'm grateful for the support of my colleagues in Congress and the President to make this opportunity a reality, and I look forward to putting the United States and the state of Minnesota back on the world stage as the host of the 2023 World Expo. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Sherburne County Sheriff's Office for receiving accreditation from the American Correctional Association. Sherburne County received this accreditation because of the quality of the county jail and the high standards the staff maintains. The accreditation was actually earned by the 116 correctional officers that operate the jail and the strong leadership of Sherburne County Sheriff Joel Broad. This is quite an accomplishment. In fact, out of Minnesota's 87 counties, only one other county jail in Minnesota received this accreditation. Congratulations to Sheriff Broad and his officers. We are proud to represent you and to work for you. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Republican friends are going to be asked this month to embrace a budget and a tax proposal with highly disputed benefits. But what's not in dispute is it will add $1.5 trillion to the national debt and up to $4 trillion in cuts to programs Americans care deeply about, like Medicaid and Medicare. There is a better way. I spent much of this last weekend in Orlando, Florida, with leaders of the American Trucking Association. These are people who understand the infrastructure crisis America faces because they and their employees deal with it every single day. Instead of cutting transportation funding or having some mythical program without details, they are willing to step up and invest more, raising their fuel taxes. They already pay about half the total costs of the Highway Trust Fund to be able to make a difference. And I would hope that Congress will look at that example, listen to those people, and be able to do its part. In no small measure, because of the leadership of many small businesses and trucking associations around the country, over half the states since 2012 have stepped up to raise their transportation resources. And the states are seeing the benefit. They're seeing the economic impact of the construction, but it's making a difference on the ground for people in communities. It is important that the federal government does its part. We need to be there for projects that are multimodal, that are multi-state, and multi-year. That federal partnership has played a vital role since the enactment of the interstate highway system in 1956. The trucking industry was able to make the point that the public is already paying the cost. About $1,500 a year extra costs for the typical family for maintenance and congestion. The transportation industry is paying some $63 billion of cost every year due to congestion. For about $2 a week from the average family, we could take critical steps to make sure that we address this infrastructure funding crisis. If people really want to have some congressional action that will put people to work at family wage jobs, not the disputed trickle-down economics, it's undisputable that every $1.2 billion invested in infrastructure creates almost 30,000 jobs. It creates almost about $2 billion of economic activity, and for each $1.2 billion invested, it'll reduce the deficit $200 million. Mr. Speaker, it's past time that this Congress stops shirking its responsibility. We ought to be in partnership, not just with the truckers, but with AAA, engineers, contractors, construction unions, local government, the vast array, the largest coalition of any group dealing with a controversial issue before Congress. If we would give 2 weeks to hear from these leaders across the country of this broad coalition, the case would be made, and I think Congress would finally step up and do its job. Our partners in the private sector, in state and local government, people in the communities can expect Congress to be a partner to make our communities more livable, to make our families safer, healthier, and more economically secure. I hope when some of our friends from the trucking industry join us this week on Capitol Hill that members will listen to their case and be able to have the courage to step up and invest in our future. Our constituents deserve no less.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Officer Floyd East Jr. of the Texas Tech University Police Department recently responded to a routine student welfare check at the dormitory. Callers reported a 19-year-old individual named Hollis Daniels was acting erratically and potentially had a weapon. So, Officer East went to Daniels' dorm room and he discovered drugs and drug paraphernalia. Hollis, the defendant, was arrested and taken to the station for a standard debriefing. But that's when the intake procedure at the police station went haywire. The defendant was not adequately searched before booking, and suddenly the dastardly criminal whipped out a gun and fired point blank into the 48-year-old Officer East's head, instantly killing him. This is a photograph of Officer East. Yet another peace officer, another guardian of the thin blue line, murdered for no reason. The suspect then fled, going on the lam, taking Officer East's body cam with him. The university went on lockdown, anxiously awaiting for the killer to be found. And sure enough, thanks to the quick actions of the Texas Tech police force, the outlaw was located on campus and apprehended again. Officer East was an El Paso, Texas native. He's survived by his wife Carmen, his 2 daughters Anna and Monica. At the funeral, it was a solemn remembrance wrapped up in the release of over 1,000 black and blue balloons which flooded the West Texas blue sky, all in Officer East's memory. Peace officers from all over Texas and even other states showed up for the funeral. And as the body passed the Army National Guard armory, officers and military stood at attention and saluted Officer East's body. Officer Floyd East began his career with the Texas Tech Police Department on December the 1st, 2014. He started as a security guard at Texas Tech at the Health Science Center in El Paso. While working as a security guard, he went on to school at the El Paso Community College Law Enforcement Academy to obtain his basic peace officer license to be a peace officer in the state of Texas. Court documents show that the defendant, when he was arrested, concealed a weapon in his pants, and when Officer East's back was turned, the coward drew the weapon and murdered Officer East. The weapon that he had was stolen. The defendant is charged with capital murder, and a $5 million bond is set. May Texas justice occur, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our men and women in blue voluntarily do everything they can to help protect and serve our communities, especially at our colleges and universities. For these remarkable men and women, their safety, like all peace officers, is never guaranteed. While the badge and the uniform represent safety for citizens, for some reason in our society, it becomes a target for other people, like this defendant. Officer East worked with university students, helping protect young Texans eager to learn on their university campus. He was senselessly killed. There's never an answer for murder except to hold the person who did the murder accountable. The defendant's friends quickly jumped to the defendant's defense online, claiming Daniels was not a monster. Mr. Speaker, college students do make mistakes. A mistake is like missing class, sleeping in. Mistakes are not murdering people. The defendant is totally responsible for his own actions. He can't blame the drugs. He can't blame the fact that he was young. He can't blame the fact that he was not thinking right. Mr. Speaker, I was a judge in Texas for 22 years and heard cases like the murder of Officer East. People are responsible for what they do. In our society, we cannot have this feeling that people are not responsible, that something else caused them to do things. People are totally responsible for the choices that they make. I've heard all the excuses. I've heard that, oh, I was too young. Oh, I was too old. I was on drugs. I wasn't on drugs. I was affluent. I wasn't affluent. I've heard all the excuses. There's no excuse. People like this defendant are responsible for their actions. Officers like East are cut above the rest of us, and they protect us from harm's way, and they protect us from evildoers. He's a rare breed. He's the Texas breed of law officers that sacrifice for the rest of us. Taps has been played for Officer East. He's been laid to rest. We pray for his family and his friends and those officers in West Texas and Texas Tech University. And that's just the way it is. I'll yield back, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, the worst fire in the history of California has devastated nearly 300,000 acres, destroyed some 7,000 homes, caused billions of dollars in damage, burned to the ground many businesses, and most sadly, taken the lives of 42 people, and that number may in fact rise. This fire was like no other, propelled by winds that reached speeds of over 70 miles an hour. It moved so fast, burning at times 200 feet per second. That's 3 football fields every 30 seconds. The people had little time to escape their burning homes. People fled with only their night clothes, no time to grab even their medication, important papers, or personal belongings. Thousands of families were displaced and will have to find housing, rebuild their homes and businesses, and rebuild their lives. Over 100,000 people were evacuated during the late hours of the first night of this monster firestorm. Many of you saw the news coverage play out on your television. The most covered area in the news is a neighborhood in Santa Rosa called Coffey Park. This is it. There alone, some 1,300 homes were burned to the ground. This area is on the far western side of the fire devastated area, a county away from where it started. The winds were so high that they pushed the blaze across 8 lanes of freeway and over 2 frontage roads to destroy the homes and the lives of these 1,300 families. The winds were so high that cars were not only burned beyond recognition, they were flipped over. There's a metal garage door that remains stuck about 35 feet off the ground in the remains of a burnt-out pine tree. Leader McCarthy was with me in Coffey Park and saw firsthand the devastation. I want to thank the leader and thank him also for his commitment to work with us to help our communities and the many people so devastated by this unprecedented disaster. Thank you also to the 11,000 firefighters, the many law enforcement and National Guard that put their life on the line to stop the raging inferno and protect the lives of the people of my district and the other fire-threatened areas of California. Some of those first responders lost their own homes, but worked 24/7 to help others. The response was awesome and truly appreciated. Mutual aid came from every county in California, states across our great country, federal agencies, and from other countries. The actions of civilian heroes and heroines saved an untold number of lives and continue to make life tolerable for those affected by this fire disaster. The fallout from the disaster will be felt for years, if not decades. You just can't rebuild 7,000 homes and neighborhoods overnight. The heartbeat of our community, doctors, nurses, workers, teachers, CEOs, and small business owners were burned out and must start over. My colleagues and I appreciate all of your words of comfort and offers to help. And the people hurt by this monster fire will need all of our help. As we move forward, we have to work together to address this devastation that has befallen the people of my district and other parts of Northern California. Thank you, and I'd like to yield my time, remainder of my time, to Congressman Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spent a lot of time with my friend Congressman Mike Thompson over the past week because our districts neighbor each other. And while the worst of this fire was in Congressman Thompson's district, portions of that terrible Santa Rosa fire spilled over to affect my constituents, and I had a separate fire in Mendocino County, the Redwood Complex, that itself would have ranked among the top 20 wildfires in California history. The fact that all these fires happened together is truly an unprecedented and a dreadful crisis. I do want to thank him. He has been everywhere in the region. I want to thank our local government partners. I want to thank our colleagues, Leader Pelosi, Minority Leader McCarthy. The support has been bipartisan and it's been nationwide. And FEMA has been on the ground along with first responders doing heroic work to get the recovery and the rebuilding process started. We're grateful for all of that, but we are only at the beginning. If you want to see your government doing good work, go to the local assistance center in Santa Rosa or in Ukiah and watch how the wraparound services are there. Every need that these fire victims, these devastated families could imagine is there to be met, but we're at the beginning, and we're going to need that support over a long, sustained period. So colleagues, thank you for standing with us at this early stage of dealing with this crisis. We're going to need you over the long haul, and we will be talking more about this going forward. I yield the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Jenkins, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, everyone remembers the excitement of receiving that first paycheck and the feeling of accomplishment that hard work brings. And we also remember just as vividly the disappointment we experienced when we saw just how much of our hard-earned money went to taxes. It's a rite of passage that we've grown used to, but that doesn't mean it's right. Americans deserve to take more home of their pay. That's exactly why we need tax reform, tax cuts, tax simplification, and why I'm working with President Donald Trump to make our tax system work for West Virginia's families. Our tax framework would cut taxes for West Virginia's middle classes, families, double the standard deduction for individuals and couples, and create jobs by making small businesses and American companies more competitive. West Virginia's families work hard and have been squeezed by our state's economic downturn. Under our tax framework, and with the support of President Trump, help is on the way. We will also make it easier and simpler for Americans, West Virginians, to file their taxes. Most families will be able to file their taxes just on a postcard, saving them both time and money. Our plan for tax reform, our plan for tax cuts, our plan for tax simplification will help us build a better America, a better West Virginia, one where families have more opportunities, more jobs, and more money in their pockets. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I join my colleagues, Congressman Thompson and Congressman Hoffman, in paying tribute to the first responders who responded to the fires in Northern California, and indeed in Southern California as well. The spirit of our community is so magnificent to see people come together to help each other. I salute our colleagues, Mike Thompson, who was just, his whole district was like, so much of his district was like an inferno, but much of his district is still thriving, and one group helping another, and Mr. Hoffman there side by side with him the whole time. This is very tragic. The loss of life is heartbreaking. The loss of livelihood is devastating, and the loss of homes, of course, will take a while to replace. We've seen other natural disasters in the rest of the country, and Harvey and Irma and Maria and Nate, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Louisiana. So many of the people of our country devastated in a short period of time. So in time of natural disaster, it is very important for the federal government to honor its social compact with the American people and to be there for them. Look forward to working in a bipartisan way for us to have the resources for FEMA to do its job, for SBA to do its job to help businesses and homeowners recover their losses, and again pray. Our hearts and prayers are with the families of those who lost their loved ones, their livelihoods, and some who are still in need of recovery. With that, Mr. Speaker, I just want to go to another subject, though. I rise in opposition to the devastating tax plan that tax cut plan that the Republicans are putting forth. If you're in the middle class, you will most likely be having your taxes increased. If you have a family member on Medicare or Medicaid, you will be most likely devastated by the impact of this. This is a bill that the Republicans are putting forth that will add trillions of dollars to the national debt while they sing the praises of fiscal responsibility. The fiscal hawks have become an endangered species. No longer are they there to say, we are not going to borrow from our future in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in our country. Indeed, 80% of the Trump GOP tax framework, the framework net tax cuts go to the top 1% of Americans. The top 1% of Americans get 80% of the Trump GOP framework net tax. And as they increase the deficit, anyone who might be haunted by the thought that, well, we better cut someplace, where do you think they're going to go? They will devastate Medicare. They will devastate Medicaid. And what does that mean in the lives of the American people? It means that middle-class families in our country will be subsidizing tax cuts for the wealthiest families and wealthiest corporations in our country. This is completely wrong. It will also have a devastating impact on our budget priorities. In our budget priorities, our budget should be a statement of our national values. What is important to us as a country should reflect what is in the budget. Investments in education so that children and families can reach their aspirations, so that communities can reach their economic success, so that America continue to be number one globally, competitively, and that we, again, have the resources to invest in science and technology and our national security to keep America number one. Infrastructure, so talked about, infrastructure, build, build, build. Build across America, roads, bridges, broadband, build water systems and the rest, all of the needs that we have. Build the human infrastructure of America by investing in education and health care and the rest. Build our democracy by making sure that our democratic process has the resources necessary to be conducted in a way where every person's vote is counted and as cast. So all of this is connected to governance, and all of this is harmed by the assault on our budget that this tax proposal will present. Middle class taxes will increase. The middle income families will pay more. Tens of millions of middle class families will pay higher taxes. And one of the ways they will is because of the great idea the Republicans have to stop the deduction for state and local taxes. This is a big hit on middle class families in our country. It steals trillions of dollars, borrows from the future, from our children's future, to give tax cuts to the wealthiest. 80% of the GOP tax cuts go to the wealthiest 1% at the expense of our children and working families and our country's future. It would devastate Medicare and Medicaid after adding trillions to the deficit. GOP will use the deficits to justify destroying Medicare and Medicaid. And they're on it. They're already in the bill saying that they're going to means test Medicare. It's in keeping with their theory that Medicare should wither on the vine, Democrats are for a better deal, but a real bipartisan tax reform. Any business will tell you that what they want in tax reform is some level of certainty, that this is going to last for a while. The only way to do that is to have bipartisanship at the table. Go to the table. What will create growth? What will create good-paying jobs? What will reduce the debt? This bill does exactly the worst. And don't let them tell you that even though they're adding trillions of dollars to the debt, that that's going to be paid for by economic growth. It has never happened. It has never happened. Trickle-down economics, President Bush tried that. It was tried before. It has never done that. It has never paid for itself. In fact, it has only increased the national debt. And in that regard, Bruce Bartlett, who was an economist in the Reagan years, as well as worked very closely with Jack Kemp in supply-side economics as an advocate for supply-side economics, said we never said it would pay for itself. Anybody who tells you that these additions to the deficit will pay for themselves by growth, it's not true, it's nonsense, and he said, BS. Forgive me, Mr. I'm just quoting. I'm just saying what he said. So this is a moment of truth for our country. What are our values? How are they reflected in our budget? How do we grow the economy in a way that increases the paychecks of America's working families so that they have consumer confidence, that they spend, they inject demand into the economy, they create jobs, they bring revenue to the Treasury? And how is it a good idea to cut education in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in our country? Nothing brings more money to the Treasury than investments in education, early childhood, K through 12, higher ed, post-grad, lifetime learning for our workers. So with stiff competition, mind you, having tax cuts which will steal from our budget investments in education is, with stiff competition, one of the worst ideas that the Republicans have to offer. But this is something that people should be alerted to forgetting the policy and all the rest of it, what it means in your life. Most likely, middle-class family, you will pay more taxes. If you have a family member who's dependent on long-term health care, long-term care, whether in a nursing home or at home, most likely you will pay a price. If you have a family member who's on Medicare, or if you are Social Security disability, you will be affected by it. The President said in his campaign the system is rigged. This is the rigging of the rig. This is taking the rig to a step that is almost impossible for us to return from. They take us down this road to ruin. They take us down this path to severe increase in the national debt to the tune of trillions of dollars, not even counting the debt service on it, at the cost of investments in our future, in our children, in our families, in fairness in our economy, in opportunity for America. This is something that must be stopped. And we can start by stopping the assault on the state and local taxes deduction. Let's hold members of Congress accountable for what they do that affects your pocketbook and your future. We'll be continuing this conversation for a while, and we'll have charts and the rest to visually demonstrate what this is. But if this is, governance is about how you raise the money and how you invest it. And this is the dialogue that our country needs to hear very clearly for not only the policy aspects of it, but the personal consequences in their lives. This is a very bad deal for the American people, for middle-class families. Democrats want a better deal, better jobs, better pay, better future, and by the way, to do this in a very bipartisan way. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to share the story of 22-year-old Luke Johnson, a graduate of Pennsbury High School in my home of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Luke was known for his quirky sense of humor and his laid-back demeanor. He was a football standout at Pennsbury and was named Best Defensive Player of the Year his senior year. He also wrestled, he played soccer, baseball, and could throw a frisbee a mile. Above all, Luke loved to be with his family and with his friends. And it was his tight-knit group who supported Luke as he battled the increasingly common enemy of opioid addiction. On May 17, 2017, Luke lost his battle with this disease after many difficult years of trying to return to normal. Throughout his fight, like so many, he was haunted by shame, loss of self-worth, and the stigma of being addicted to opioids. This pain was shared by his friends and family, affecting the entire community who just wanted to help, to see Luke be Luke. As he tried to work his way towards recovery, Luke's parents, Maureen and John, discovered the genesis of his addiction, a prescription opioid pill given to him on his first day in high school. It progressed further when he was offered opioids after a football game wins during his junior and senior year in high school. Ultimately, he was offered and accepted the invitation to try heroin. Imagine the difficulty for this family and millions like them. At first, Luke's family was dumbfounded, angry, and hurt. They had no idea the difficulty he was facing. They mobilized to support Luke by placing him into local rehabilitation facility, but later found out that their insurance would not cover inpatient treatment, so they sold their car for his initial recovery. However, when Luke came home, the people, places, and things from his old life triggered a relapse. His parents hoped that a facility in Florida would remove these triggers from Luke's life and put him on the road to recovery. After several months of recovery in Florida, Luke was forced to find another place to live. This was the move, Mr. Speaker, that he was not ready to make. He died a few days later before he had fully unpacked the few belongings that he had. Following Luke's death, his parents established the Luke's Hero and Me Foundation in Yardley, Pennsylvania. Their goal is to help with the awareness, education, and to destigmatize opioid addiction. Ultimately, they want to ensure other family, friends, and community networks can save their Luke. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to submit to the congressional record a letter I received from Luke's parents.
Without objection.
With opioid overdose as the leading cause of death among our young people, we have little choice but to act. And when I met Luke's father, he gave me this picture of Luke. And he asked that we remember Luke as we work to end this epidemic. I urge my colleagues to join me in this call to action. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to have the privilege of revising and extending my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is always an honor to stand in the well of the House, and I'm honored to do so today. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to defend the Honorable Frederica Wilson. Mr. Speaker, I rise to defend her not because of her color. She is a person of African ancestry, but Mr. Speaker, I don't rise to defend her color. I believe that it's not the color of skin, but rather the character within that determines the worth of men and women. So I rise to defend her worth. I rise to defend who she is. I rise to defend her integrity, her honor, and her dignity. I rise to defend an honorable woman. Mr. Speaker, I do so because in this country we have allowed public discourse to be degraded to the extent that the President of the United States of America would call a member of Congress, an honorable woman, wacky. Mr. Speaker, this is not a wacky person. This is a person of honor and integrity and of intellect. Mr. Speaker, she's a former principal. She didn't just show up in Congress one day. She was a state representative and a state senator before coming to Congress. I rise to defend her. I rise to defend her because, Mr. Speaker, it has been said that she's an empty barrel. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to believe that one who has served the country as well and is capable and is able as the maker of that statement would do so. But it says something about the influence that this president is having on people of honor and integrity. It says something about the influence that he's having on society. This is not an empty barrel. She's a person of intellect. It has been said that she's all hat and no cattle. That's an insult. That is an insult because somehow someone is trying to send a signal that others will receive as a person who's an airhead. She's not an airhead. She's not a person who has all hat and no cattle. She has sponsored meaningful legislation. She's been in a fight to free many young women who have been taken captive. She's tenacious. She doesn't give out. She doesn't give up. She doesn't give in. She's a fighter. And I stand and I rise to defend her. And I do this, Mr. Speaker, because I believe that Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. She has been lied on, Mr. Speaker. I do so because I believe that William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to earth shall rise again. There are people who have tried to bury the truth about this good woman in an earthly grave of lies. Mr. Speaker, I rise to defend her because I believe that if we allow one person to go undefended in a circumstance like this, every person is at risk of being treated in a similar fashion. We are in some very difficult times, and many of us don't realize it. We have a person who is at the top, who's setting the tone and tenor for the country, who is demeaning the dignity and respect that his office commands. Mr. Speaker, this has to stop. There are those who say wait until the next election. I am not one of them. I believe that the remedy for this kind of behavior and the impact that it's having on society is impeachment. I yield back the balance of my time.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.